Welcome to the Houseware webinar. This is the Wartime CMO's Guide to Marketing and Analytics. I'm your host, Divyansh Saini. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Houseware. Today, we have people joining us from all across the globe. So as we have more people rolling in, we'll take a moment to have you all be seated. Let us know in the chat where you're joining from, and we'll go from there. Before we get started, some house rules. We have the chat open, so let us know all your questions in the chat. We'll be taking a couple of them towards the end of the show. Feel free to share any specific challenges that your organization is facing, and we'll try our best to cover how pipeline optimization could work for your organization and have Blaine join us on that. For all the people who are joining and might have to drop off in the middle, we'll also be sharing the recording of the event, so you don't have to worry about it. Feel free to reach out to us after or before the event as well. So with that, I think all of us are able to see me, and I can see people joining in as well. So I'm joined today by Blaine Carper from Snowflake. Blaine, along with her team at Snowflake, led the charge for marketing analytics, where Snowflake used Snowflake to run their internal processes. What is most exciting about this journey is that they ended up doubling their day one pipeline conversion rate using pipeline optimization techniques which were built on top of Snowflake. And I think, as all of us know, the title of the show today is the Wartime CMO's Guide. We are already in the second month of 2023. We are in February. It doesn't feel like that. Time does fly. And I think everyone is talking about this in B2B SaaS specifically, that efficiency is becoming the name of the game. And Blaine is here to shed some light on how Snowflake achieved this mammoth task that is increasingly crucial now for CMOs, marketing teams, and data leaders. So Blaine, thank you so much for joining us today. Starting at the beginning, what challenges were you looking to solve and why?
Well, thank you for having me. So Snowflake is like any other company. Ultimately we need a reliable forecast view that can be used by multiple different teams because, company growth is directly linked to an accurate forecast. So we needed something that our sales and finance and marketing teams could all rely on to get that accurate and reliable pipeline picture. So not just for what's happening in this quarter, but also, what's going to happen 3 quarters out. And we also faced a number of different challenges that, really pushed us in this direction of changing the way we were looking at our pipeline forecast. Fundamentally, a sales cycle has a lot of different touch points. It's very human driven. So you get a nuanced customer journey for almost every opportunity. And more often than not, all of those touch points are happening across different systems. So, not only do you have siloed teams with, people who are looking at data differently, but then you also have data coming from lots of different sources. So with that amount of disconnect, it becomes really difficult to get that accurate picture of your pipeline position and what your future quarter forecasts are really going to look like. And that also means that your sales and marketing teams might be addressing pipeline differently just because they have their own understanding of the opportunities. And so you're lacking that unified approach. And ultimately, Snowflake was at a place where we said, we need a solution that's going to help us address those challenges and ultimately empower our teams to have a more, intelligent and data-driven view and approach to future quarter pipeline.
Amazing. And I know we were just talking before the event, and you mentioned that you've now been at Snowflake for almost 6 years. I'm assuming this was not the first time a question for pipeline optimization or this challenge really came about. So I'm curious to hear, was this the first time that team was looking at this? And if not, what was the previous time?
Yeah, so we've seen models come out of different teams. We tested a CRM-based solution previously, but ultimately, for us, we looked at this just as not being as scalable and needed to find another solution.
And Snowflake being Snowflake, such a large enterprise, a public company to that end, can do this in-house. I'm curious to hear, for people in the audience who could be joining from companies of all sizes and sorts, if you could give some rationale behind moving from a point solution, like a commercial solution that is available in the market sitting on top of CRM, to deciding how do you build this in-house? What was that journey like? What were the decisions that led you to that final journey that you took?
So, when you look at the other solutions that are out there, like CRM based, like, commercial, even if you're doing something that's like within, a very out of the box format, it just isn't customizable. And so you're not getting that level of tailored, tailored output that you really need in order to get a reliable forecast. So by bringing our solution in-house, we could design a machine learning model that was 100% tailored to what Snowflake needed, and using all of our data-rich ecosystem in order to get a complete picture, and bring in, data sources from all of the different teams, who were speaking different languages, and bringing them together into one model.
That's great. And I guess it wasn't that easy in the beginning. And I'm curious to hear, when you really started this out as a project. Now it has been live for almost like a year now. I'm curious to hear, when you started this out, what were the North Star metrics for the team? What are the metrics that you track, the success metrics for this project when starting out, or for Snowflake?
So when we started out with the project, we took a step back, like with any project, and said, what's our business objective? And that's to get all our teams on board, looking at the same data, same pipeline, and the same forecast. And in marketing, our number one metric is day one pipeline. So what that means is it's the amount of pipeline you have in forecast to close on the first day of the quarter. So it means that if you have 4x of your bookings target, we can be pretty confident that you're going to close the amount of opportunities that you need in order to hit your bookings target. For us, that shows that we believe that the sales team is going to be successful, and that's what we need to track. And even outside of Snowflake, even if you're using a different pipeline coverage metric, you still have to track towards that. So by providing a data-driven visibility into what day one pipeline of your future quarters is projected to look like, then marketing and all of your teams who are touching pipeline can take proactive measures to address pipeline gaps and to ensure that they do have that level of coverage on the first day of the quarter, so that they're confident that they can hit their bookings targets. Because ultimately that's what we all really want, is to have a predictive view that we are going to be successful.
Amazing. So you essentially ended up hitting three different functions there: marketing, sales, and finance. And for a lot of people in the room, like, data is daunting. Data is, when it reveals some truths, it's not really the most pleasant truth that you want to be hearing from it. So I would like to take a little bit of a turn here into the more cultural aspects of working with data and revealing these insights to different stakeholders, when it's such nuanced and different functions which operate in their own different ways: marketing, sales, and finance. We at Housewell speak to founders, CMOs, teams every day, which are trying to crack this problem. And I guess, like, a lot of people, including me, are curious around, how do you really bring these three functions together: finance, marketing, sales? Could you give us the magic pill behind Snowflake's execution of this project, around what worked, what did not work?
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head that they all kind of operate differently. So with finance, they have their eyes on revenue. With marketing, we're really looking at driving a pipeline creation. With sales, they're focused on closing business. But all of those focuses are linked to company growth. And that's why pipeline is so key to that, because that's ultimately what's going to drive your growth. It's the indicator of future bookings and revenue. And linking all of those tenants together for those three teams helps break down the silos among us, so that we're all in agreement that this is a real thing that we have to focus on. And in order to get these teams comfortable with the data as well, it needs to be in a package that is accessible to them. because there's varying levels of data literacy across each of your teams. I don't expect a salesperson to be a data scientist, but what we found was that putting this in a Tableau dashboard that was really, really easy to digest, with options for our power users who might be a little bit more data literate, like our finance team, can then drill down to an even more granular level. And for me, as I was socializing this in EMEA, because that's where we really took this to the next level with our sales and partner teams, was putting it in front of them and saying, how are you going to use this? And then taking whatever feedback they're giving to make this more accessible to them, more usable, so that it's really a tool for them and making data a part of their day-to-day life and showing, look, it's not as scary as you might think it is.
And let's go a little bit into the behind the scenes from here, right? When you show these insights to these people, I'm sure the question is, okay, what is going into this model? It cannot really be a black box. What are some of the, if you could share some of the data points? Were there any unusual ones? Were there any quirky ones, or the insights that you got from them? How was the model really coming together?
Okay. So the way that this was designed is that it's a bottoms-up machine learning model. So that means that we're focusing on specific characteristics of our inputs rather than taking a top-down approach, because that doesn't give you the same level of granularity that you needed or that we need. And so at the first point of this, we're modeling at the opportunity level. So that helps us determine the likelihood of the opportunity's future quarter close date. And then we're modeling at the rep level. So forecasting the number and size of opportunities that a given account executive might open. And that's what's giving us this complete picture of our future pipeline predictions. And one of the critical data sets for this actually is a snapshot of our opportunity table. So that means that we're looking at, on a daily basis, what's an opportunity in Salesforce look like, and what are key fields that we really need to focus on looking like at a given point in time. And in order to determine those, it took a lot of business context. But for us, it was looking at things on the opportunity, like the stage name, like the forecast category, like the forecasted amount. And then account information, you have your account firmographics, if they're a customer, how much have they spent to date. And then finally, we've got your sales engagement. So who's working those opportunities and what actions have been taken on it at this point in time. And so those pieces are the foundation for our model. And that's what's enabling us to recreate what a deal looks like at any point in time for the last several years.
Great. And I guess some of this was also a long process. It sounds simple in retrospect when you talk about the snapshot of Salesforce. Salesforce is set up in quite a different, unusual way for every company, how the implementation goes in. And in this entire process, I'm assuming there's points of feedback that you're getting from those three stakeholders: marketing, sales, finance. I'm excited to learn a little bit more about here around when did you decide to show it to them as like, look, these are the first set of insights that we're getting. What was the iterated loop there like? And were there any interesting aha moments where your team and you got feedback from them saying that, hey, this is what I can do today, this is what I can do tomorrow from the data and the insights that I'm getting out of this model?
This is actually my favorite thing to talk about because I just get so excited about showing people how they can use stuff like this to improve the way that they're selling or the way that they're supporting their stakeholders. So this was initially something that was only meant for really like executive leadership, and it was going to sit with our sales and our marketing and our finance leaders as we were looking at, like I said, pipeline position. But when I started digging into this data that my colleague had put together, I was like, look, this is amazing. And this has so much potential if we put it in front of our sales teams, put it in front of our sales leaders specifically, because pipeline's, number one in their minds. So I sat down with my operations counterparts and sales ops and SDR operations and said, how do we get your team's buy-in on this? How do we get them caring? And yeah, ran loads of enablement sessions with our sales leaders, really made the data palatable to them, and then started taking the feedback of, like I said, how do we make this more usable for you? How do we get your buy-in? I mean, for me, one of the best things that I've heard since rolling this out last year was someone saying, "This is the only dashboard that I look at. I look at it every day." And we,
Nice.
took that feedback and built in the components that make people want to look at it on a regular basis. And ultimately, this also shows a lot of scary numbers that are very motivating to anybody who's associated with bookings. Even as a marketer who is really focused on pipeline creation, if I don't see the coverage that I need there, then I know we got to have a game plan to fix that. So not only, making people more comfortable with the data, but we're also scaring them a little bit to get them taking action. And again, going back to breaking down those silos among teams, getting all of your teams who are touching pipeline working together to drive company growth, to get the pipeline coverage that they need, and ultimately, get that conversion to bookings that we want to see.
Amazing. And I think we have people joining here now from all over. So any word of advice for anyone who's trying to think of building these models in-house right now? How
Mhm.
should they be approaching it? What are your biggest learnings and any word of advice for them?
Yeah. So with the model itself, think about what it is that you need to understand and track so that you can get that historical snapshot. So as I mentioned, with us, we had a number of key fields that we needed in order to recreate what an opportunity looked like at a given point in time. So my advice is prioritize those fields that are required in order to do so, so that you can have that picture at any given point in time.
And to that end, we talked about the phase, we talked about how this comes together. In terms of the architecture which led Snowflake to be successful for this, would you consider that this is some sort of a universal standard that can be followed across almost at least all B2B SaaS companies? And for the people who are in, as a follow up to that, for the people who are in, like, let's say a Series C, Series D company, which are just getting into the growth mode at a certain ARR mark, would you think like they have enough data to be working on a model like this?
Mhm. Those are some good questions. Uh, I'll start with the last one. So if you're, at a certain stage where you're still quite small, and you don't have like massive, massive amounts of data, or your sales team might not be as big, you might be better off with an out of the box solution at that point in time because it's just more accessible. But as your organization grows, I mean, for Snowflake, we just kind of feels like blossomed overnight into this huge org. Um, if you are in a position where you do need something that caters to all of your data that's more customized, you do kind of have the ability to take on the same kind of architecture because fundamentally it's always going to be a build, model, and deploy process, no matter what you're using. For Snowflake, what was really great is that we can incorporate all of those stages into just Snowflake itself without having to go outside of our platform. Um, and we're able to then run things like our pipeline forecasting model end to end from, generating data and scoring models and fitting those scores to score new data and transforming the output into the business view that you saw with the Tableau dashboard. Uh, the fact that everything can run end to end in Snowflake just makes it really easy for us. But like I said, ultimately the architecture is universal, no matter what platform you're using. Just happened to be easier for us to go in house.
I'm a big fan of Snowflake. I think we all know that for the people who are joining in at Houseware, we have built our entire product on top of Snowflake pretty much. So, and you rightly mentioned, right, in your previous previous thing, that Snowflake pretty much blossomed into this enterprise very early on, and that grew the need for this sort of thing to be done in-house. But as a data leader who's supporting, let's say, marketing as a function, just having the data itself, just having the culture nuances itself is not enough. You have to show some sort of business outcomes. You have to build a case for it. I'm assuming that was the case for Snowflake as well. Could you shed some light on like what are the success metrics that finally you were able to achieve, and what really meant for the project to be really utilized across EMEA, across the globe now?
Mm-hmm. So for us, we didn't have, a super key success metric. It was really on my end, could we get all of the teams working together, and could we make data accessible? But what came about from this, as you can see from Denise, our CMO here, is that our success came from being able to make those better investment decisions, better time decisions. And, when you're looking at that dashboard view, you're able to see this is where I have to prioritize a certain sales team. This is where I need to, take certain measures. And then for us in EMEA, what we saw was that after we really kind of like built this culture of trust in data and engagement across these different teams, we doubled our day one pipeline conversion rate. And I strongly believe that that comes from people looking at numbers, trusting them, and talking about them.
That's great. And now that this is successful, this is directly coming from one of the LinkedIn people who are joining us right now as an audience. What is next for Snowflake from here? Where do we go from here as a project? What are the next things top of mind for you?
Yeah. So for us, we got the team buy-in on our pipeline forecasting model. So we've even rolled out a number of other analytics use cases based on machine learning. So we have a lead scoring model it's not visible on here, but it's one where we created an ML model that scores all of the leads that are coming in and help our SDR team prioritize which ones are the leads that are most likely to convert to a meeting. And we were able to save 27,000 hours of manual sales processes by implementing this. And we doubled our meeting conversion rate. So, things like that, building out an account scoring model where we are partnering with our sales BI team as well to look at how or which accounts are most likely to convert to opportunities, and help our sales teams then better prioritize which of their prospect accounts to go after at a certain given point in time. So got a lot of different use cases that we've been able to execute on and continue to build that trust and that culture of data, and getting people making those smart time and resource investments, not kind of spending too much time looking around without any focus.
Snowflake on Snowflake. I love it.
Yeah.
Day one pipeline doubled, 27,000 hours saved. I don't think many of us realize that 27,000 hours, I was just doing the math right now. It's almost like 3 years of time saved for an organization like Snowflake. Means a lot. I think jumping into one of the questions from our listeners, I think we have time for one. So I think Gerald asks today, what is the typical business threshold in terms of accounts, headcount, pipeline stage, or size, where Snowflake is particularly well suited for serving some of these marketing analytics workloads and use cases?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. So I would say you do need to be kind of in a more mature business where you do have lots and lots of data points to draw from in order to get the complexity that you need. For us, we're ingesting thousands and thousands and thousands of rows of data in order to run our model. So I would say, if you're just starting out, probably not the best time to implement something similar, but that doesn't mean that you can't run other kinds of models on Snowflake. Like the lead scoring one, as an example, is one where you don't necessarily need to have the same amount of opportunity data or the same sales team size that we have. You can build a model to score those leads that are coming in and score the likelihood of them converting, because I think we've all got, our lead database. We all want to know who's going to get the meeting, get the opportunity. So, that's just one of the many different use cases that you can deploy on Snowflake, regardless of the size of your company.
That makes a ton of sense. And I think to add to that, I guess, like once you have like enough data, as Blaine said, you can also start to think about incorporating more things like product users data. You could add like more streams of data where your users might be there, especially in a PLG context. So even if you're a small Salesforce organization, you can probably add like more things to the model itself and start to think about it in a slightly earlier stage of the journey. We hear this from leaders all the time that we should have been thinking about this yesterday, especially because Salesforce snapshots need to be stored for a model to work. And that turns out to be like one of the prerequisites for this to work, as you also covered in your talk before. So with that, I think we come to an end of the session today. Thank you so much, Blaine, for joining us. Thank you so much, the people in the audience. And Blaine, I think I have one last question for you before we call it a day here. Where can people find you? Where can people reach out if they have any questions?
You can find me on LinkedIn under Blaine Carper. Also, feel free to reach out to me, blaine.carper@snowflake.com. Happy to answer any questions. I love talking about this. I think there's loads of interesting things you can do to make your companies more focused on data. And so feel free to reach out, and hope you enjoyed it.
Awesome. I love it. More focused on data. With that, we call it an end to the Houseware webinar on the CMO's Guide to Marketing Analytics. I hope to see you all soon in our next series, which is going to be at the end of February. And thank you so much for joining us for the show today. Have a good rest of the day and hopefully see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.